Pleased to be joined by Brittany Martinez and Talis like this week for Eyewitness News PolitiCast. And we're focusing on a few things, but we want to start with our governor's trip to Washington, D.C. Governor Newsom, it's his first out-of-state trip since the fires burned in early January. And it's one that comes off the heels of President Trump coming to California, having a bipartisan sit down with a number of congressmen, including Kern County Congressman Vince Fong, who made quite an impression at that meeting with the president. Somebody who was not there though at that meeting was Governor Newsom. Now he's since flown to D.C. He's met with both senators there. He's also met with a few other Democratic Congress members that were at that sit-down meeting, and also the president. But really, um, there's no filming or no film between that actual correspondence at the White House between the two, other than the fact that it supposedly happened. Or I guess Brittany, we'll start with you on this first. Um, what do you make of this press tour, his continued presence online, meaning he's putting on like a lot of these YouTube shorts, a lot of these X clips that gets his name out there, gets the, I guess the look or the appeal that he's doing something in the wake of these fires. Does it have any effect or any positive viewpoint from folks that have been severely hurt by this fire?
Well, I think that Governor Newsom wants to run for president in a few years. So I think that's a little bit of what's happening here. As far as if this is working for folks at home, if they think that he's actually getting the work done, I mean, I will say that this is something that's been a pattern ever since the fires were starting. I remember a few days into the fires, he was tweeting, giving himself a pat on the back about like, we are using all of our resources. Mind you, the fire was contained exactly 0%. So I understand a desire, especially when you're a leader, to show like, hey, I actually am working. And listen, a lot of these things unfortunately can't be done at the snap of your fingers. So the presence of letting folks know what he's up to is important. But at the same time, we've seen Newsom do the red state tour, right? When he did that a year or two ago. We see him in Washington, D.C. this week talking about the fires and also just talking about his relationship with Trump. I think that if we recall last year, he started that $25 million defense fund to prepare in order to likely sue the Trump administration. He himself says that they have an interesting relationship that everyone should be paying attention because it's one of the most interesting in politics. I don't agree with him often, but I do kind of agree with that. And I think a lot of it is just showmanship on the Trump end of saying, new scum and insulting him. But ultimately, they'd have to work together. You can't withhold funds for something as devastating as the worst fires ever in the state of California. And I think that he'll continue to try to show the work that he's doing, whether people believe him or not. I think that, I'm sure he's doing the best that he can, but also as a Republican, if you look at sort of the things that have happened under the Newsom administration in California, crime, gas prices, you can't get water. Now you get water with the president's executive order. And I know that there was back and forth about whether the release of that water was helpful, even though on paper, obviously, literally, more water seems like a good idea. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I see him continuing to message and try to make himself look good so that people know that he's doing work for them.
Intel, from everything Brittany just listed as to some of the issues with California, I know a number of those things can be felt across the country, and essentially the handling of it by administrations and Democratic administrations, even some Republican administrations within the state government, is ultimately what led to a successful Trump victory, is it not?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair point. I think, as Brittany mentioned, Governor Newsom has, in the last several years, made himself out to be someone that would talk to anybody, kind of go anywhere. He goes on Fox News. In this case, more recently, he was willing to meet with the Republican delegation in Washington, D.C. So I feel like that's a kind of realigning to where he was in the past. And I do think that is, as Brittany mentioned, an indication that he's looking to expand his profile nationally. What's very popular in California may be not as popular nationally. That being said, I do think there is a realignment in politics taking place, right? So you've seen it in the last couple of weeks as congressional Democrats and namely Senate Democrats have really kind of used the old playbook in response to the secretaries and the confirmation hearings, and then more recently showing up at government agencies and sort of scrapping with some of the Doge people. I really do believe that Newsom is at the head of the pack of thinking realizing that the American people, voters, taxpayers, are looking at government spending and the behaviors out of DC a little differently. Foreign aid, USAID is kind of the one that we've heard the most about this week. I think Newsom realizes that as we have to sort of tick through these programs and taxpayers are asked if it's a good use of money or not, where we think Democrats and Republicans land in that conversation, everyone's sort of questioning that, right? It's feeling a little bit like everyone who's been in charge up to this point was part of the problem. I think Newsom is sensitive to that and is now trying to kind of position himself in a way where he can get behind whatever's popular. I think you could see, for instance, many of the governors begin to be critical of some of the dollars that are going to overseas and saying, hey, we need to bring those back to our communities. We need to be fixing our roads and building bridges and things like that. And a Newsom could be actually a great messenger for that as a Democrat, saying, hey, foreign aid makes sense, but we should invest in our people in some of the most underserved communities in my state. I feel like I may be giving him too much credit, but I feel like that's what they're doing. They're setting themselves up to have that national conversation in a way that's going to be helpful for his, future plans.
No, but I've always had that feeling whenever I've interviewed him, and when you listen to his speeches, is that he has this sense of, and Kevin McCarthy, I think, is maybe another really good example of this too, even though politically on the political spectrum not the same, but it's this real sense of California pride in the area of where they come from. And obviously, they totally disagree on maybe a number of the ways of how to get to maybe a common solution or common goals, but it's something that he's very proud of his state. He's not really looking to outsource a lot of jobs or influence or say, hey, we should do things like these people over there. He really wants things to be led from California, from the grassroots down here, and to lead across the state. Now that also can fall into some issues across the state, as Kern County very well knows. But it does seem like a genuine effort on his end to try and put California at the forefront. It's just whether or not he listens to other people across the state. Brittany, is that a good characterization of your former boss and Governor Newsom?
Oh, my former boss. I hope he's doing well right now and yeah, it was great working for him. Yeah, I would say that he was extremely proud to be from California and to be from Bakersfield, and that was something that I think you felt in the office all the time. And it was whether it was his personal office or his leadership office, I think that you felt that pride. And so that was being someone not from Bakersfield, but kind of feeling like I was an adopted daughter of the city because I spent 5 years traveling back and forth there a lot. I appreciated getting to learn about that, and I think he injects a little bit of that into all of the policy. Absolutely, especially when you're talking about water and energy, like it's so crucial to Kern County, and that was something always at the forefront of his mind. And when you think about what he's now doing with Alpha, his new incubator, that's one of the issues. We're talking about energy and being competitive with China, and I think that all kind of stems to his roots and where he's from.
And then Tal, it's that question though is okay, I can go and I can have these meetings and I can say that the meetings are productive and whatnot. And it's Trump sounds very similar a lot of times when he has meetings across the aisle. These things sound very productive. But at the end, is there a compromise? And does the governor have the ability to compromise on these particular issues? One of the things that we've spoken about that he has to an extent is on CEQA, but only for those homes damaged in Malibu and also in Altadena. So in Pacific Palisades. So, what are your thoughts on that? Does Newsom have the ability to compromise in a situation like this and to say, okay, maybe let's do things this other way?
Yeah, I know that the folks that surround Governor Newsom are smart people. Now, their politics you can agree with or disagree with, but they aren't dumb people. So I do think there's an opportunity here. People have been saying that you take Trump seriously, but not literally, right? On the trade war, it's something similar. We've postured in a very strong way to Mexico and Canada, and then what's the deal at the end is fairly reasonable, right? So I do think there is an opportunity for Governor Newsom. I think there's an opportunity for President Trump to indicate that he was influential in helping solve a problem. What I'd love to see is Governor Newsom to take this opportunity, the political cover that working with President Trump or having to work with President Trump presents, and say, hey, this could be an opportunity to reform CEQA or to exempt for the purpose of building homes CEQA. There's all kind to look at the Coastal Commission, which is beginning to happen, to blow up some of these institutions that ultimately are a huge hurdle to getting anything done in California. this moment is unique for Governor Newsom because he can say, hey guys, we're kind of over a barrel. We've got these disasters. We've got a president who's being very provocative. Let's do things we haven't done in the past if they're good for the people of California. And he doesn't necessarily have to own it or say that, hey, we made a mistake. Let's fix it. It can be like, hey, we're being pressured this way because of President Trump. So I hope that's the path we take. I do think that, as we were talking about earlier, voters will reward that sort of behavior and that sort of progress. Going back and just, let's plan on fighting President Trump tooth and nail for the next 4 years. I don't know that you're going to get much of a political reward for that because it's kind of the way things have worked all along, and look where we're at, right? So I hope they would be a little bit more creative politically looking forward.
Yeah, and one last note on that. AB 442, new assembly bill. Hopefully, we have a reporter covering, I think, that later tonight. I'm trying to put him in touch with a lawmaker on that. And essentially, what that is it extends the CEQA really to any of these burned out areas, especially with one-lane roads. And it just seems like a very common sense type of thing. But we'll see what happens when this comes from the state legislature versus when it comes as kind of an order from the Trump administration. Do assembly members in the California State Assembly and then eventually the California Senate, do they take something like that seriously when it comes from Republicans that aren't as high profile
Right.
as President Trump? Something that'll be interesting to see. And to stick on California's Assembly, we have an election coming up at the end of the month on February 25th, and then we have also some big news on that today, which is that the Kern County Republican Central Committee has finally endorsed a candidate. It's who anyone who has connections to the Kern County Republican Party would expect to endorse, and that's Stan Ellis doing so over Holly Willoughby, the two Republican options of the four candidates for this particular race. And Stan Ellis, a longtime player behind the scenes for the Kern County Republican Party, very well liked in the business community locally here, has maintained a very good relationship with lots of people that are involved. In fundraising and picking out some of these candidates and going through the vetting process. Tal, for you, what are your you've interacted with Stan before. What are some of your thoughts and impressions of him as a person, now as a candidate?
Yeah, I'd say it's very much on brand for the current state of politics, right? So businessman who's been very active politically, has been very successful doing, kind of giving back, right? I'm sure Stan has other things he could be doing that would be more enjoyable than serving in the deep minority in the California Assembly, but has done the work, has raised the money. As I understand, I think he's raised over $200,000. I don't even know that the other candidates have met the minimum thresholds for reporting requirements. So effectively, he's the only candidate in this race and seems to be running a just kind of a diligent, straightforward campaign. It's a sprint because it's a special election. So I think there is the opportunity, from what I'm hearing, there's an opportunity for him to win this in the primary, which would allow him to begin hiring staff and be sworn in and do all those sorts of things and really hit the ground running. But once in a while, you get what the profile of a donor and a community business leader actually make their way into politics, and everyone kind of scratches their head and thinks, well, we'd like, it'd be nice to have some more of this. So I think he's going to be very successful. I think he's going to wrap it up in the primary, and I think he'll probably get very frustrated because he's again going to be in the deep minority, and he's a conservative Republican. But I think it's good when folks like that give back and serve in those institutions.
A lot of times when we think about Republican primaries these days, and of course California has an open primary, but a competition between Republican candidates, it's usually a competition of who's further to the right, who is closer to Donald Trump. Lots of those things tend to play into focus, and I think the point that you made, Tal, is important. Where he seems to be the more conservative candidate. Holly Willoughby seems to be more far right. She wants to investigate Kern County sheriffs for alleged corruption, amongst other government officials that she says are corrupt, and she wants to also do that from a role within the state assembly. Unclear how you can do that role and also reach across the aisle to Democrats and make that your life goal, but she's wanting to make that happen. And I think the interesting thing here is this endorsement from the Kern County Republican Party came a little late so that it does not appear on the mail-in ballot that most people will receive. And her interviews are something interesting to be experienced, as I can attest. Um, and so they've garnered a significant amount of views, I think even more than what stands have online. But all those heavy hitter endorsements, Vince Vaughn, David Valadeo, I believe Connie Conway as well, several other local people are throwing their name behind Stan Ellis, and I think most notably, Brittany, is Kevin McCarthy, too, former Speaker of the House. And again, it seems post ouster and post Matt Gaetz ouster as well. It seems like if this former speaker is putting his name on a candidate, he means it, and he means it very seriously.
I would say so. I think we saw some of that come into play last year with some of his endorsements of folks throughout congressional districts. And when you're talking about these YouTube videos too, something that I do want to say is that we see that in Congress all the time. And I know that we're talking about at the state level, but there are, and I won't name any of the names, and you guys can, go and look at them up yourself, but you have some freshmen out here saying absolutely egregious things, but they already have 3,000 followers on Twitter and they've had an account for 6 weeks, right? And we're in the day and age, unfortunately, when it comes to politics, where a lot of people are just trying to make a name for themselves, say something a little out of the box, and hopefully get attention that way. But thankfully, that doesn't always mean that gets votes. And maybe they get attention, maybe they get a lot of Twitter followers, but ultimately these legislators are working for the people, and I think they need to be worried about the results. So just my 2 cents whenever, because that when you said YouTube, that kind of sparked what I've been seeing a lot going on in the political world. And it's good when good people who know what they're doing. I know that Ellis comes from a background in the energy industry as well. I think that's incredibly important when we're talking about the district. And I think, well, we'll see what happens, but I think that he would be very good for the community.
Yeah, he has a lot of support, and from a lot of the people that if you trust your Kern County endorsements, then I think that he'd be someone that you'd be very happy with, especially if you like what you've seen in Congress from David Valadez or Vince Fong, for them to throw their name behind as well, in addition to Kevin McCarthy's quite a ringing endorsement in that election. Again, on February 25th, and you heard Tal say he needs to get 50%. So this is the way that it works. If he gets 50%, he is in. He'll be heading to the assembly in probably a month or so after the certification. So probably sometime in April or May. Now that said, if no candidate gets the 50%, that means that there will be a runoff that also takes place in April. And then again, probably the same process where about a month after the certification, you'll see a candidate in. And when we think about this seat, it's been vacant for almost a year. Vince Vaughn, of course, leaving in June of last year, taking office in Congress in June of last year as well. So it's been open for quite some time. The other candidates in the race, Democrat Chris Cruz Boone, she has if we're going to go into the nitty gritty, she has a candidate statement that she says the Kern County Registrar of Voters misspelled. So that we've looked into that. That has happened. It says name instead of names, and when it comes to like her history as a person within the California, I think Professors Association, something like that in her history from before. So quite interesting stuff going on there. It's spelled correctly up in Tulare County. So if you're in Visalia, you'll be happy to see that. She was probably not too thrilled. We talked with her about that. And then the other two candidates, Holly Willoughby, the Republican, and Libertarian, William Brown. So four candidates for February 25th. We'll be looking forward to that election and some special coverage on it too for that election night. Thank you both so much and for sitting through this whole recap of what to expect in Assembly District 32.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.